give us just a little introduction to yourself and a brief history, if there is such a thing, of your experience in the world.
History isn't necessarily brief at my age, but actually, I am a professor emeritus at Northwestern University in the Department of Molecular Biosciences. I began my career actually before I went to Northwestern. It turns out to have been my third job. From graduate school, I went to West Virginia University, where I spent 3 years. And it was actually at West Virginia University that I became interested in sperm, other than how I happened to sire 3 sons while I was in graduate school. But the only lab that was available to me at West Virginia was to work with a guy who was studying bull sperm. And so that perhaps got me started in reproductive biology. You know, that's kind of the start of things. Let's say that taking this to the realm of reproduction was what I was trying to figure out. Here I was working on sperm. What could we do with this other than, you know, it's a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Well, you think of sperm, you think of reproduction, and I thought about the fact that there were women with unexplained or idiopathic infertility that was due to anti-sperm antibodies. And these had never really been identified to any significant extent. I thought, okay, I have an antigen that's not present in women, so it should be antigenic, should produce antibodies that are specific for sperm. So perhaps we could look into developing this as a contraceptive technology. And that's kind of where that idea started. As you saw today with the work that Deborah Anderson's group is doing with what basically was an anti-sperm antibody isolated from an infertile woman, that kind of that's sort of substantiates my original idea. I think that still, you know, the goal of MCI and the thing that once we gave up the idea of immunocontraception, and I should, as an aside, say, why didn't we consider this for men? Well, my idea was that you would be immunizing men with a self-antigen that could have adverse reaction.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we just, I thought as an immuno approach, it would never sell. And so with Marty's group and looking for using LDHC as a target for, you know, screening his libraries, the target actually was found. There's a molecule that does inhibit, but there, you know, as with all preliminary results on targets, there are issues in terms of things like solubility, specificity, et cetera, et cetera. And so but I think that finding a sperm antigen is a viable goal. And if I was, you know, in the midst of my career looking at it now, I probably would, with all the new techniques, the amazing technology that's available, I would really put all my pennies into that pocket.
Yeah, looking
Yeah.
at moving that forward. Do you see, the whole contraceptive field goes in waves, right? Ebbs and flows. And one of the things that we ask ourselves a lot is we feel like we're definitely in a high point around male contraceptive discussions in particular. People are being more vocal, the population is being more vocal about their interest and their demand for it. And there seems to be development is consistent and the momentum is there. Do you feel like this is any different than, like today, that momentum is any different than what you've seen in the past? Does it feel like maybe we've finally gotten some traction and we're going to get there?
Well, I have a little story that addresses that.
Okay.
Back when we started, somehow or other, we were immunizing some female monkeys in Chicago at University of Illinois had a monkey facility. And so we got antibodies from the monkeys. But the story got out to the local news media. And all of a sudden, news folks showed up at my lab wanting to see the monkeys, but theoretically to interview me. It was totally unexpected.
Wow.
Okay, so a story came out, this professor at Northwestern's working on contraception, blah, blah, blah. I got more inquiries from women. When will this be available? Do you need volunteers for testing?
Wow.
This was in the mid-60s,
Wow.
mid to late 60s. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so I'm curious what you think. One of the things that we've been talking to some colleagues that we've come across about is sort of reframing reproduction in general. So when we're thinking about bringing men into the conversation more, right? Like one of our colleagues, Lisa Campbell-Engelstein, said, we don't think, society does not think of men as reproductive beings. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really profound statement. But if you think then that you're kind of coming in and shaking things up a bit, that there's really a conversation looking at reproductive longevity, like how someone uses contraception across their entire lifespan, because the interests change, right? So like individuals, a woman might use an immunocontraception in the future for a year, like you said, and then to be able to space or what have you. But what would you think of like shifting the entire field of reproductive health to be, instead of these columns of like OBGYN and andrology, to being like reproductive health care providers? Do you think that
Well, this was something I tried to promote when I was president of ASA. And okay, again, I think of examples. What I would say is that males know very little, if anything, about female reproductive system. I think that probably is true for most men.
and women, I mean,
Yeah, women too, probably.
yeah, I mean,
But,
better, but
Yeah, so training or teaching reproductive health, well, I don't know what they teach in school anymore, but
I don't think it's reproductive health.
in many states, absolutely not.
So at ASA, you were advocating for a focus on just basic health, reproductive health literacy, or I can't.
And in fact, we did establish a website for andrology. The reason for this was, we'd go to the ASA meetings. So you're in a hotel, you're wearing a badge that says Andrology Society. Other people in the hotel, particularly the women, say, well, what's andrology?
Yeah.
And my answer, my clever answer was, well, it's the same as gynecology. You know what that is, except without the strokes. And, okay.
I have to ask you, can I ask about your pin? I love your pin.
Oh, yeah.
Was that something that was that a gift or?
I think at some meeting that I attended, these pins were passed out.
It's really cool. I like it. That's what we need to put out for people is like a little sperm pin. It's very cute.
Some of my colleagues at Northwestern, I was at a social gathering and wearing this jacket. I didn't even realize this was the pin that was in the jacket. And one of my colleagues who works in nanotechnology and is probably going to win a Nobel Prize
Oh, wow.
saw the pin. I want one, he said. Erv, you got to get me one.
If I had to ask you one last question, and it's a big one, it's just sort of, what do you hope for the future of male contraception or reproductive? I mean, you've covered the gamut. So where do we need to go from here? Like if you could get everybody in a room and say, this is what you people need to be doing, what would that be?
Well, you know, I think the answer is an answer that anybody would give to that kind of question any time. And what you need is education. You gotta teach what the problem is, how you treat it, what the advantages are, what the disadvantages might be, and that there's a relationship between reproduction and sex. So yeah,
It's just be straightforward and teach them.
straightforward.
I like that.